Okay, good evening and welcome to the most recent installment of Building the Scottish State with myself, Dr. Mark McNaught, here on the 12th of May, 2022. And I have the great pleasure of having with me this evening Mr. Gareth Wardell, otherwise known as Grouse Beater, under the pen name of Grouse Beater, and he is with us tonight. And so, first of all, welcome, Gareth, and thanks for being with us this evening.
I'm hoping it'll be a pleasure.
Okay, we'll make it a pleasure. We'll do our best.
Before we start, what's a Yank doing in King Arthur's court?
That's a good question. Yeah, I'm not too far from Brocéliande, which is the forest where Merlin was from.
Absolutely.
But to make a very long story short, I finished my studies at the University of Texas. I didn't want to stay in the United States. I just had this bad feeling about the future. I think that was very well borne out. In '94, I got UK citizenship, which enabled me to come to Europe and study and work anywhere in Europe. And I got a post teaching English in France, and I ended up getting a PhD. And now I've got a post here, and I've had a post in Rennes since 2006, teaching American civilization and law, political science, and others.
So you're fluent in French?
Yes. I
admire that.
I started studying back in high school, in the early '80s, but nothing really prepares you until you go there and you have to sink or swim, in terms of using a language. So Texas, especially Texas at that time, was not a place where it was easy to find French speakers to practice with. So, I preferred to come here and, speak to real French people. So, yeah. So tell me a little bit about your life and how just kind of the course of your existence and what brought you to working in the arts, working in movies. Tell us about your upbringing and how.
I'm a classic theatre material. I run away from a broken home, and that's the kind of hallmark of people who gravitate towards a life in the theatre. I preferred movies, but there was nothing in Scotland back then in the late 60s to talk of. There was a couple of good filmmakers. If you wanted to do anything better, you shifted down to London.
Yeah.
However, I could make and get involved in theatre. And I eventually got into the Royal Scottish Academy of Music and Drama, which was rather nice because all my family are and were then professional musicians, pioneering musicians, and it just seemed to be the right place for me. But I wanted to direct. I didn't want to act. I had this, you have this feeling that you have something to say. You don't want to repeat someone else's words that someone else has written. But when you're young, you don't really have anything to say. And incidentally, it was the time of Clint Eastwood.
Okay.
And his cowboy movies,
Right, yeah, late '60s. Yeah, what is it? Outlaw Josie Wales and Good, Bad,
and I met him.
Ugly, and
I met him up in San Francisco in that right-wing enclave called the Grove, which I will be writing about in my book about my adventures in Hollywood. He was a very nice guy, very quiet-spoken.
Kind of unlike his persona that he often portrays in his movies as being kind of a psychopath.
Yeah. I got him to laugh when he asked me about what films I'd like, and I said I absolutely thoroughly enjoyed Mel Gibson in the William Wallace film. Only that I didn't know William Wallace was the only person to own a razor. So.
Well, just going back a little bit, were you born? Are you from Glasgow originally, or where are you from?
No. The reason I got on in the world is that I very soon understood and perceived and copied bourgeois good manners, and you only find those in Edinburgh. I picked them up really, really quickly, and even knew the right tie to wear, to get into the right kind of society.
Whoa, gosh.
So yeah, I was born on the same block as Sean Connery, who at that time was like almost everybody's hero. I mean, to a guy who was 100% working class,
Mm-hmm.
you know, making it to Hollywood and making it big. He and his first wife, Diana Cilento, they were bigger than Burton and Taylor when I was young. And he would come back, you know, to be with his mother and his father in the middle of town where he lived, Fairmile Head, and go round and order fish and chips. The only difference is, of course, he never had to pay for anything that he ordered.
Everybody gave it to him.
I have still to pay. So that's really, you know, after the theatre, I got involved in television. And
so what year are we talking? Just roughly mid-60s or
late? No, it was about late 70s and 80s.
Okay.
Moved into television, making youth programs. The BBC. I had created there was no national theatre in Scotland. There was a few people around who were trying to start a national theatre. Ludovic Kennedy, who was the chairman of the Lyceum Theatre in Edinburgh, he was really keen. And his wife, the wonderful dancer, Maura Shearer, the ballet dancer, I phoned him up and said, look, I've just started this national theatre for young people, you know, aged between 18 and 22, young actors, writers, potential directors, musical performers, because I just think there's all this talent in Scotland and they've not got a chance to develop it. You know, it doesn't go anywhere, so we should nurture that. Would you like to be the chairman of this new institution? And his wife came on the phone and she said, we've been trying for 3 years to get the Lyceum to be the national theatre in Scotland. And we believe that the Scots don't want anything of quality. And, you know, to a degree at that time, she was right. So after the theatre, when I decided that if I didn't like spotted youth, egocentric spotted adolescents anymore, and that time did come, I couldn't relate to their aspirations. You know, I was keen to get involved in drama of adult stories, adult affairs.
Mm-hmm.
The BBC called me up and asked me if I'd want to apply to be their head of youth programs. It was time in London first, and then Northern Ireland, right in the middle of the Troubles.
Wow. Okay.
And
I'd like to hear more about. I'd love to hear more about that when you get to it. So,
yeah, that was an eye opener. And eventually, after 2 years, various things happened. I asked to be shifted back to Scotland, and they put me in radio. And said, just wait here, there'll be a job for you in television drama suit. But it never came. So one day, a writer that I had helped and who had suddenly become a commissioning editor in Channel 4 phoned me up and said, do you want to make some youth programs? Which I did. You know, I shifted out of the BBC. And then after that, the Channel 4 gave me £2.5 million to make a political thriller about Scotland. So that was it. That was the start of it. And then the Bank of Scotland noticed what it was doing and told their American investors there was this very talented young man going places. Would you like to invest in my company? And that's what got me to America.
Okay.
You really can't work with Hollywood at a great distance. You know, you don't exist unless you're there. You know, you're in their office.
Okay. Well, speaking out of ignorance, tell me about the movie that you did produce in Scotland. That was, I mean, again, I'm speaking out of complete ignorance. So, if you
I did lots of small dramas, including shooting the first pop video with the Proclaimers, Letter to America. All these things were. And there was one day when I was in Los Angeles, and it was the start of a film. So I don't know where it was set in America, but it was a train coming over a bridge, and I heard, you know, I could walk 500 miles, and I remember looking around and thinking, where the hell am I? I thought I was in Los Angeles. I was in Los Angeles. So, they got to the studios before I did. And the film that I co-produced and helped write with the author based on his book was called Brond, B-R-O-N-D. Mm-hmm. The author, Frederick Lindsay, a really talented man and a supporter of Scotland's independence all his life. It was in his writing. And I was late getting involved in films. I was in my 40s by the time I wondered if there was a chance. And he was in his 50s before he decided to write his first novel. And it's still one of the best 100 novels ever written in Scotland. And it was really, a story about how Scotland's system of governance, police, the Crown Office is manipulated easily by London and Whitehall. Mm-hmm. They just send a few guys up, and how MI5 are able to stir things up. So Jeremy Isaacs, who was in charge of Channel 4 then, and much missed, I have to say, he's a Glasgow guy, announced afterwards that it was a first-class piece of the highest professional quality. And then I made another film, but in Edinburgh, and that was about 5 young guys in Leith. Yeah, wait for it. Mm-hmm. Unemployed. And how they decide, one of them's read a book about Norwegian explorers getting to the North Pole. And he's with a gang, and the guy said, no, we're Shackleton. We don't get there. We lose. We're Scott. So, and a year later, Trainspotting came out, which was far more popular. I mean, and it had a budget, and it had the Miramax behind it.
Yeah,
I did it by raising the money, getting the script together, producing it, and handing it to the wrong director, who had no sense of humor. And he gave me this kind of Germanic, dark piece. And I was incredibly depressed at the preview. But it got a showing that Channel 4 bought it, and then the British Screen. It's somewhere in the vaults of British Screen. And that was when the Americans started to call, come over to America and see what you can do there. But by then I was I'm in my 50s. I was salt and pepper then.
If you could compare a little bit about the English relative to the Scottish film industry. I mean, I'm a little hard pressed to think of what particular English theater is. Maybe, I don't know, Chariots of Fire, or I don't, maybe other ones. But I mean, how would you compare the English cinema to Scottish cinema?
When David Putnam came along, he brought with him a whole lot of young radical directors from TV commercials, like Ridley Scott. He's the best example. Mm-hmm. Ridley Scott realized that if you've got 20 seconds, every second matters. And to get energy in the screen, you could have a cutaway to a horse's hoof going through a puddle, so the water's thrown up there. Somebody's running. Exactly the kind of things that the director put in Trainspotting. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The characters are running around everywhere, jumping over things. They're always getting into trouble. And I think that the English system, what it has down there in England are funds.
Yeah,
£1 million funds, which Scotland doesn't have. And so you take Scots take their projects down to England, and you just hear almost immediately, that's not commercial. Why? Well, it's not English, is it? It's not really British, or whatever they have to say. STV tried to start a film unit, and they made an English film immediately. I mean, Scottish television did it. and it was a flop. So the English film industry has got a really good history, a long, illustrious track record. Whereas the Scots, we have to wait till somebody comes to Scotland to make a film.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like the Maggie, about an American and a puffer boat, and you know, how the crew are always drunk, but they still managed to outwit this American. And then the similarly scripted Local Hero.
Mm-hmm. I remember seeing that. Yeah.
Yeah. So and those were the days where even in England you could not make a movie unless there was an American. No disrespect here, unless the central character was played by an American, because you wouldn't get it distributed in North America. But that once the working class actors took over from those with the plummy voices, you know, the Sean Connerys. There was a Welsh one, you know, there was an Irish one, Peter O'Toole, you know, there was one from every Celtic region. Suddenly, the working class accent was commercial. Mm-hmm. And that's really where Scots managed to get a lot of work down south in English movies. Mm-hmm. But I point out the obvious. The English didn't make Braveheart. It was the Americans who came over here, and we didn't have any, because we weren't an independent country. We couldn't offer them any tax advantages, right. So they took a whole, they took a whole chunk of it to Ireland. You know, when you look at the film, the hills are too domesticated in the background. And the first 20 minutes, this is me doing my film review number. The first 20 minutes are not much better than a BBC television schools broadcast. Mm-hmm. It's got that kind of pace to it and kind of plonky, ploddy way. And then suddenly it just takes off. And it really is an excellent film. But of course, it had to be rubbished. You're asking me what's the difference between English films and Scots films? Well, Scots films get rubbished by our English colleagues, and they do it subtly. You know, they'll get some Scots historian to say, "Was it true that he had a French lover?" Well, of course it wasn't true. I mean, that was a Hollywood piece put in there. You know, you have to look at the symbolism, what it meant, and you know, the rebirth of a child at the end, and all that sort of thing. But still, you know, people who still vote no against Scottish independence, they don't seem to notice that our heroes get their heads chopped off by our English colleagues, hung, drawn, and quartered, you know, bayoneted. Yeah. You know, and you try and tell them, you know, that the British state is one of the most brutal imperialist states on the planet. Now only overtaken by the US of amnesia.
Yeah. We learned from the masters. Yeah.
Absolutely right. And it was all Scotland. I mean, when you look at what William Wallace did, he got down past York, and instead of going on to London, you know, capturing it and changing history, he thought, we've done it. Look, guys, you know, it's like Scottish independence movement. We've gone this far. What's the point of going all the way to London? I'm hungry. I miss my kids. Let's go back. Yeah, come on, let's go back north. So, you know, just when the power is in our hand, we'll let it go, you see, because we've proved to ourselves that we couldn't do it, but we didn't do it 100%.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about your experience in the States. And how long were you there? What were some of the projects you were involved in?
I was still here, obviously. You know, my wife Barbara was still here. Daughters were here. I couldn't give up Scotland. I mean, I'd be nothing without my Scottish heritage and history. And that's what I took to America. Mr. Wardell, it's Wardell, but call me Gareth. Okay, Gareth, your accent is just so authoritative. Are you talking to me? You know, authoritative. Are you sure?
Yeah.
I'm from a poor district in Edinburgh. You've got this terrible subservient, you know, nature, you know, that you're can I be as good as these other people that can talk proper English, a Southern accent? So I met a lot of movie stars, got into all the studios. There was always somebody trying to push me, but I didn't have a portfolio of directing movies when I went over there. I had a portfolio of projects and a portfolio of top-ranking cinematographers that wanted to work on those projects and actors. So I found it difficult to try and convince anyone to give me work. But very quickly, I found I was in demand as a script doctor. You know, producers would come to me and say, we've got the screenplay, Gareth, and it's a big name writer, you know, but he's done his 2 drafts and God damn him, he won't do another one. We don't think it's right yet, you know. Can you give me a report on what you think's wrong with this script? You know, you're an educated guy, you know. So I would look through it and I would send a 20-page report for a couple of $1,000. That would help pay the rent in my digs in Glencoe Avenue, Marina Del Rey. Where else would a Scotsman find a really good apartment? And then if I was lucky, they would call back and say, we'll love your ideas. You're telling us it's not got enough humor. You're saying that a love relationship is weak. Could you fix that? And my answer was always, do you want it good or do you want it Thursday? And if they said Thursday, I had them over a barrel. Well, Thursday is $20,000. If you give me 3 months, $10,000. No, wait, we need this yesterday, Gareth. Yeah, come on now, come on. Have your guy talk to our guys. You know?
Yeah.
That's the way it went.
Okay.
I don't know if that answers your question, but that's me being honest. I enjoy my time in Los Angeles. But geez, you know, it's such a poverty-stricken area, and you look and you say, this is one of the wealthiest countries in the world, probably the wealthiest country. And I'm sitting here among, extreme poverty. You know, there are people sleeping on the streets as if it's Delhi, you know, as if it's somewhere Calcutta in India.
Yeah. Well, it's just such contrast. I mean, you do have the most wealthy and the most poverty, and it's even worse now. I haven't been back for a few years, but I mean, from everything I can see, I mean, you know, from compared to when you were there and I lived there in the 80s and early 90s, and it's much worse in terms of poverty, in terms of, you know, people just getting a decent job that pays the bills, that's reliable, that they can have, you know, for a long term. They just don't exist anymore, and a lot. It's a very, you know, it's a very, very difficult situation.
Well, when I went over there with my, I had a lot of contemporary stories, some scripted, some were just 20-page storylines for a script. But I had 2 what you would call historical dramas, one on the Highland clearances in Glencoe, which, as I've said before, is the one I expect to be thrown in my grave. But my good friend, the movie music composer, Patrick Doyle, was generous enough to read it. I wasn't sure if he didn't believe I actually written a script called Glencoe. So just about a month ago, he said, I would love to read that. And so I sent it to him. And I know he was he was being honest when he said he realized it was a really good piece of work, and I'd done a ton of research to get there. So I took these to America, only to discover that America was over here making Rob Roy, you know. Rob Roy made on the back of Braveheart, which is quite a common thing for the Hollywood studios to do. If another studio has had a big success, they'll catch on to the coattails of that publicity. Yeah, you could hear the studio saying, "Hell, you know those goddamn sods over there. They've got this Braveheart thing. It's making millions. Have we got a Scottish script?" And somebody says, "Well, yeah, this guy's been knocking on our doors for 10 years. He's got something called Rob Roy. It's all about honor. And they're in kilts and so, right. Just get the damn thing. Get it sewn up. Get the contract.
Get it out of there.
Get out of there. Just do it. Don't give me this shit. Just do it. And that's how it gets made. Not like the UK, where everything is judged on its merits. And I love the American way of doing it. You know, the way that from Orson Welles, who really started it, characters will talk over each other, you know, and they'll turn away, and sometimes what they say is slightly muffled. Whereas in British films, we've got the theatrical tradition. You speak, I listen, I respond, you listen, you speak, I listen, which is slightly awkward. And I think we're still learning how to make movies in that sort of American, much more naturalistic manner.
Yeah.
So having realized that they were over there and they were over here and I was over there, I also realized that Alex Salmond had managed to get together a referendum. And I thought, I have to be in Scotland for that. To hell with earning money here. I've got to get back to Scotland. So I came back, I'm going to say early 2014. It might have been late 2013, but for this interview, that's the material. And I had a dilemma. I'd always been aware of the S1.EP and had helped get them on art committees and the like. Always brought them into anything in the arts I was doing. It was just a natural thing. I'd already made 3 party political broadcasts commissioned by Mike Russell as a writer-director. And so I had this dilemma of whether or not I should be a member of the S1.EP. And what crossed my mind was that one day somebody would confront me and say, are you a member of that S1.EP bunch? Because, up until the S1.EP gained power, we were almost an ostracized organization. We were more than eccentric. We were the separatists, the nasty party. We were going to break up the union. And so I knew I would get confronted by somebody, and I didn't want to deny it 3 times as the cock crows. And so I joined, and it was probably the worst thing I ever did because their administration is just chaotic. And I found meetings interesting. I met a lot of interesting people there, committed, a great feeling of camaraderie.
Yes.
So
So you joined around 2014, or was it after the referendum?
It was just because I was only a few months at Edinburgh Central meetings, and I very soon realized they were not going to use my skills. My skills are writing, my skills are finding a memorable phrase, and my skills are turning something the other way around so it startles people. I may not have any other talents, but I know I've got those ones. Yeah. And I even managed to meet Alex Salmond when he was out canvassing, and he gave me 10 minutes of his time. I noticed he was quite cocky, and I thought, I don't think women will like that. And I think that was one of the things that put a lot of women off Alex Salmond. That he had it's this cocksureness, I know that expression may be an unfortunate one to use, but it is the one that I think best summed up his character. But he was such a consummate statesman. I noticed he even knew the role of the speaker, the rules of the House of Commons better than the speaker in the House of Commons. And I liked his rebellious nature, his subversive nature. So as a man, I could forgive that, but it must have put off a lot of women, because you would hear them say, oh, I just don't like him at all. And you ask them why. Well, he's trying to get us full rights. So I found that since the S1.EP were not really using my skills, I should go do something else. And that's when I decided to set up a website and just write. And again, it was the book author of Brond, Frederick Lindsay, who had first said to me, Gareth, you've got really good polemic skills. Have you ever thought about writing? Put them down on paper and use them politically. I just smiled at him when he said that. But that was how it happened. So I've arrived. Everything in life comes too late.
Okay. Just to be clear, you came back to Scotland in around 2013, 2014, and then did you join the party before the referendum?
No. Yes, I did before the referendum.
Okay. Right.
But by 2017, I decided that under Nicola Sturgeon, it wasn't really getting places. It wasn't the dynamic, urgent, onward moving organization that I had joined, despite the fact that I discovered sitting next to me at one meeting, two people who didn't want independence. You learn a lot by just listening to people's attitudes. I said, why are you in the SNP if you don't want independence? I don't think it's right, actually. I just think we need more powers. Now, of course, when the independence referendum was based on a local election franchise, guaranteed to lose, the number of people who voted no, 55%, many of which switched in the last week from yes because of the vow, and because they were just feared, independence, what is it? It's something, it's an existential fear, threat out there, what is it? I don't think we made enough of saying things will change the night we're independent, but it'll take 2 or 3 years before you notice any difference, because the hierarchy, the politicians we've selected will go and negotiate with England. They'll work out this new relationship, this new deal. They'll have to bring it back to our parliament for debate, and we might have to go back again because some things they don't like, and then they'll bring it back again, and we might have another referendum, because somewhere along the line there's a deal that we have to keep. For example, we have to keep Trident on the Clyde. We have to be part of NATO, so I just drifted out of the SF. I kept sending them money, donations. I sometimes, after what they did, I sometimes feel like writing, saying, could I have that money back, please, with interest?
Yeah, I went to, between 2017 and 2019, I went to all of every 6 months I went to the conferences. So I met a lot of SNP members. I came from abroad, so I mainly was a member just so I could go to the conferences. But it was very instructive going there, and I'm very appreciative for all of the people I've met and the contacts that I've made, which have served me in very good stead. But didn't you get purged from the SNP because of some pro-Palestinian comments or something like that, or what was that story?
Well, I laugh now, but it's a nervous laugh. I had this strange thing where I wrote an essay condemning the GMB union, which is an English. The source of it is English-based, it's London. And about 3/4 of the essay, I happened to mention the woman who was leading the strike, of cleaners in Glasgow. I did two things, as I normally do. I complimented her for something she'd done, and then I said the comments that she made at that rally were inappropriate, and did she understand how undemocratic it is for a union to deny a nation its full rights, its civil rights, and still call themselves a union? And anyway, taking all these poorly paid women out of work for at least 3 days, where they lost their pay, was misogynistic. And I started to look at what they were up to, and I said, it seems to me to be a union led by men who are sexist. Well, a year later, something happened that I didn't know about. When I was writing that, the GMB was being investigated by an English QC for sexual harassment events and gross misogyny. And in fact, he found against them. And the chap who started a rumor about me, a falsehood, the head of the GMB, his name was Roach, as in cockroach. He sent me this text for daring to criticize the young woman who had been speaking at the rally, and to say that I was anti-Semitic because she was Jewish, which didn't matter to me. I mean,
did you even know?
No, it wouldn't have mattered to me. As I've said before, people who say that say you should have known by her name. Well, I say, well, where does that lead? Should have known by her facial features. Is that what you're saying? Because that would make you anti-Semitic. And in any event, have you asked me if I'm Jewish? So I was tarred as anti-Semitic, which was the GMB's way of trying to shut me up. Yeah. But unfortunately, the Labour Party decided, well, here was something we can hit the SNP with. And I think...
Oh, right, yeah. Just as they did with Jeremy Corbyn as well.
It was absolutely identical. You know, I mean, what the British state did to Jeremy Corbyn is just...
it's revolting.
Shameful. Absolutely shameful. And that includes, you know, backed by some of our, I have to call them friends, Israeli friends. Nicola Sturgeon had just come back from Israel. I was still in touch with the Israeli Education Film Service, you know, because I'd made dramas with them, some of the family being Jewish. So they decided, you know, the Labour Party decided they would use that as a stick. And to my astonishment, it appeared that the SNP endorsed that. But it turned out recently that I was sent a copy of a letter from headquarters when I said, look, I'm coming to talk to you. I sent a letter explaining matters. I was a private citizen. I wasn't going to come to any disciplinary committee. I wasn't a member of the SNP. How can you throw me out when I'm not a member? It's that, you know, it's like everything under Nicola Sturgeon that she touches is flawed. It's seriously flawed. You know, things turn to dust. It's not just ferries. The policies that she aspires to put to the Scottish people are seriously flawed, and she can't see it. And even when people tell her, she won't actually acknowledge it, which I believe was her reputation as a lawyer, a divorce lawyer. She had the same problem of eschewing, dismissing good, sage advice from senior colleagues and sticking to one solution only and following it through. You know, this is the only thing I can, this is the answer of my client. And as far as I can make out, I stand to be corrected. She never won a single case. I can see why she decided to leave. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in time, you know, you notice that things are seriously wrong with the SNP, but nobody's fixing it. So what is wrong? You know, where is it going wrong? And I mean, I stayed loyal to the independence. You know, people who say, that's it, we'll never get it under Nicola Sturgeon and they walk off. Well, they're wrong. If you want independence for your country, you have to begin by accepting it might be a lifelong cause. Mm-hmm. You can't walk away from it. So I'm still here. And it was, again, Alex Salmond, who, when he formed ALBA, decided that I should be given an honorary membership. I don't, you may not like to hear this, but I don't actually feel like a member of ALBA only because I'm not an activist. I admire their policies. There will be one or two later on that I'll probably disagree with, in the same way there were policies that Alex helped promote Angus Robertson's joining NATO, for example. Mm-hmm. That's putting Scotland in the palm of the US of A, who control NATO. You know, already selling off chunks of our sovereignty before we even get the damn independence signed and sealed. So it turned out that the SNP hadn't actually endorsed, the committee hadn't actually endorsed I was anti-Semitic. They just didn't like me not turning up to the committee and sending a letter.
What committee were you on, or what was the?
No, I wasn't on any committees. I was to turn up in front of the disciplinary committee.
Okay, even though you weren't a member.
No, I was a private citizen. I mean, the SNP have a problem there.
Wait. So, under what disciplinary? Under what?
You hadn't checked. At the bottom of my letter, I sent them. I said, "Just leave my membership where it lies, on the floor." You know, that didn't seem to twig.
So you were called to a disciplinary hearing for the SNP, even though you weren't a member.
Correct.
Okay. Right.
And then I made the error of going to a lawyer, the same one who lost the case for Stuart Campbell of Wings, to say, look, there's some of these Tory and Labour people call me anti-Semitic, and I'd like you to send them letters to say stop it, you know. And then I said, but the villains here are the SNP. I'm a lifelong member of the SNP. I've got life membership, and my father was this and this. I said, you mean you won't actually be doing anything now? So I agreed he should send, I think it was about 3, 4, 5 letters out to people. I paid him for that, shook his hand and walked off. Maybe something Stuart Campbell should have done. Because Stuart Campbell ran up £220,000 of lawyer's fees. And to lose his case, you don't win.
In my view, I followed it. You know, I read Wings regularly, but I just don't think he needed to get involved in these legal issues. I don't see why.
You shouldn't, because you've crossed a line. It isn't independence anymore. You know, it isn't integrity. It's about oneself.
Yeah.
You know, you're the celebrity. I have this theory that people like me who arrived at social sites like these, you know, being interviewed, we arrive with a reputation already made. You know, I already have a vocation. You know, I've got films with my name on it. I have books at the published by the Royal Academy on the arts. I have my lovely essay book. People like me can walk away if we want to. We can say, well, you know, we've done all that. I'll still support independence. I will vote for it if the National Party ever put it forward. But people who make their reputation on the internet, I think, find it difficult to walk away from it, because that's where their name is, and so they need to stay there. You know, they need to be up front, and that's really why I try to ration my appearances. People just get sick and tired of you. And look at me, I'm an old guy. I mean, you know, it's like. It's like everybody I see now, they're just old guys. I'm sure Craig Murray doesn't mind me saying that. We're all kind of walking around and doddery. Speak for yourself, Gareth. Yeah, we are. And there are a lot of young people out there probably find some of our ideas a bit old-fashioned. So it's important, I think, just to make an appearance when you think you can make the best effect. You know, you can do something that's important. and then step away from it again. But I've done that all my life. That's how I've promoted talent. I've spotted it, nurtured it, and then said, you go. My maxim is that a good teacher is the one who teaches you to stand on your own 2 feet, to look after yourself, to make your own decisions, and to live by those decisions and your mistakes. A bad teacher is the one who says, you will need me all your life. You will need to come back to me whenever you've got these problems. Come and see me. Let's talk them through. That's a bad teacher. So whenever I've helped other people gain a career, gain their confidence, as I did as a teacher in schools and as a lecturer, pushed them and said, you can do this. You have the abilities. You don't see it because your head's filled with doubts and uncertainties, but you can make this work. I'm telling you, I'm an experienced person telling you, go and do it. Give it a try. Make an error, but learn from that error, as a painter would.
Okay.
It was Picasso, wasn't it, who said when he was asked, how do you manage all these experiments? Not experiments. I'm on a journey. I never do experiments. I'm on this life journey. So I feel that's what it is. Okay. So yeah, the S1.EP were idiots, but I was an early indication of what was going wrong with them, that they were closing down. I mean, what are we doing with a first minister who either herself or her spads, her assistants, are blocking people on the internet who are supporters of independence, who are Scottish citizens? What are we doing with somebody who's elected to the first important prime office, who's making decisions as to who she will or will not represent? I mean, that's outrageous. And the same goes for our MPs. If some of them don't like using Twitter, for example, don't use it. Make it party policy. If they are going to use it, don't block people. Leave the bad stuff on. Have your assistant report the bad stuff to the authorities of Twitter.
Yeah, if it's truly criminal, if it's truly defamatory.
Absolutely. But don't shut down your own kith and kin. That's not Scottish. That's somebody protecting their ass. There's a good American expression.
Tell your ass. Yeah, well, in the remaining time, I'd like you to reflect on what you would like to see in an independent Scotland, and Lord help us that you'll see it in your lifetime. But what, given what you've seen, given your lifetime, the relationship between the British state and Scotland, the imperial age, and how do you want a new independent Scotland to be different? What are the things that you see currently within the British state or within Scotland itself, the Scottish governance, that needs to be different and better after independence?
Well, that's a big question. I would most definitely think that Old Scots should be the first language taught in primary schools.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. I would like a freer kind of education. I would like all private schools to be closed down. I think everything lies in education. Everything lies in how you're nurtured. Some of it may be nature, but a lot of it is,
most it's nurture, in my view. Who you are as a person,
what your parents did, what the people around you, what they did, what they thought of. I mean, we're all shaped by that. My character is a bit of that person I admired, a bit of that person I read, and I liked his work. Your personality gradually gets shaped by the people around you.
Yeah.
So it would be educational, which is essentially my background, that I would hit on first of all. And as I said to one other person who interviewed me, I would like happiness to be taught at universities. I would like there to be a degree in happiness. How we can, and I don't mean pleasure. I don't mean hedonistic pleasure. I mean true happiness and learning about how to speak honestly. I mean, I'm not somebody who thinks you should not lie. If a fox was to run past me, and 5 minutes later, the guy's on horseback with the hounds stopped to ask me which way the fox went, I would say it went that way.
Yeah.
So some lies are justified, and sometimes we use them every day, don't we? We have to be diplomatic sometimes. I have incurable cancer, and I have to be diplomatic. Without answer, people saying, "How do you feel?" And I feel rotten. It's the damn son of a bitch has reached my face now. You can't see it, but it's there. And so, what does that mean? Are they going to cut my face up next? Not looking forward to that. If they cut my face up and I get another year, well, I'll be lucky. So I'm straying away from what you asked me, but I think Scotland, it doesn't have a class system like England.
I've noticed that. You do have the lords and the aristocracy that live on their estates, but it's not the same. And I don't see that Scots have the same fealty or obsequiousness towards the class structure that a lot of English people do, in my view.
No, as Professor Baird would have told you, for the interlopers, for the usurpers, the colonial invaders, for them to be successful, same as the Romans, they have to convince a section of society to go along with their new ways, speak Roman, use a horse, all that kind of thing. And it's exactly the same for England. They have a huge section of Scotland's bourgeoisie who've cottoned on to the fact that if they're going to be preferred citizens, then, well, they better vote Tory and go to the right plays and read the right books. And there are some things one should not talk about. So we're at that stage where we really have to try and keep hold of what's good in Scotland. And one of them is we don't have an English class system. I mean, did you see Master and Commander, the movie? Did you see?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't.
The 12-year-old, who loses one of his arm, like his hero Lord Nelson, and when they're under siege by the French ship, it should have been an American one because, hey ho, Hollywood altered it. Well, we can't have it. It was a time of the American wars. No, we can't have it an American ship. It's got to be make it the French. They're the villains, right? So
we're the good guys. We're always the good guys.
Sacre bleu, roast beef. Yeah, we hate you, and we're back there again. We've got dear Boris. He's gone to war with Europe again. Exactly as English have done for centuries. They can't get on with anybody. I mean, I'm laughing at this, but my God, it's just terrifying. However, the point I'm making is you got this 12-year-old who's given command of the ship over and above experienced sailors. Guys have been sailing all their life. That's the English class system because the young lad is aristocracy. Preserve us from that.
Yeah, just like, what is it, Prince Andrew having all these medals and being like commander of, I mean, it's just absurd. Yes. But and how is it to what extent is there a class system in Scotland? I mean, I know it's different from England, certainly, but I mean there is a class system to a certain extent, but how would you, in my view, I think there's much more of an egalitarian sentiment. I think.
Oh yeah, there is. If there's a class distinction, it will lie in the street that you live in. It'll rely on the house or the apartment. If you've got an apartment in a Georgian apartment in Newtown in Edinburgh, you could be totally poverty stricken, living on welfare.
Yeah.
But you live in a Georgian house in the middle of the capital of Scotland. Now you could live in Pilton, which is a working class district of Edinburgh, and nobody will want to know you. You're only a mile away, nobody will want to know you. So there's that kind of classlessness, and it tends to be, when you do meet it, when you do confront it, it tends to have derived from English mores, like what rugby team do you support? So you've got to try and make that up if you want to be accepted by the company that you're in. So there are little nuances like that. But you're absolutely right. Our egalitarianism is better. And the other day there was a letter. I should have written it down. To say, a letter appeared in the Herald, and it said, so-and-so has written yesterday saying that the Scots are completely different from them. This is not true. You speak the same language, you eat the same things, you watch the same television programs, you wear the same
I think I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, you have the same politics. And I wanted to write back to him and say, listen, you dumbass, you've just made the case for colonialism. You've just told us, you've confirmed we're colonialized. think for God's sake, while you've still got time. So there you are.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, we're going to wrap up here in a few minutes, but anything you want to say just on the current situation with the independence movement? Do you see things going forward? Do you think we can find a different way to independence through, for example, the claim of right rather than through a Section 30? I mean, how do you see going forward?
Well, there are so many different ways. If the key nationalist party had done their homework, they would have a new accord worked out to offer England. They would have sent someone to the United Nations to put forward our case for independence, because Scotland fits the criteria of a colonized state to T, absolutely. And we could have gone to the Queen. She doesn't have the same powers in Scotland as she does in England, and we could have just said to her, we're withdrawing from the Union. Here are all the breaches, Your Majesty. Out of courtesy, we're letting you know first. Now, she's not supposed to get involved in politics, so what is she going to do? Grab it out of her hand and rip it up? I don't think so. Set her corgis on us. I don't think she'll do that either.
Release the hounds.
Release the hounds. So, yeah, we could have done all that, but we don't have a leadership at the most critical moment in our history with the courage or the statecraft. It is essentially that. As I said to a group of people the other day, one of the things I was taught at university was never to get involved in personalities. Don't deal in personalities. Deal in policies. Deal in actions. Deal in what people say. But in the situation that we're talking about now, which is a very grave one, this terrible conflation between war in Ukraine, Boris taking us out of Europe, Putin realizing that Europe is weak and he can make his move to protect Russia, and the USA realizing that they've goaded Putin into making the worst possible decisions. So now they'll get the last of European states under NATO, therefore under USA control, because we know that NATO is controlled. They have, by the US, they've got the finger on the button. These things have come together at the worst time, to which we add climate change. Now all but forgotten. We've got the big conglomerates, the Exxons of this world, saying they're going to start up more investigations for more gas and oil. Big time, we're plowing up the earth. It's terrible. But these people are saying to themselves, doesn't matter. As long as we're wealthy, rich, we've got, we hold the power, we hold the rights, we don't care. Anyway, if you're talking about climate change, destroying the planet by 2050, not immediately, but in stages, it will become inhospitable. Flora and fauna will die off. Who cares? We will be dead by then. It doesn't matter to us. It matters to us at the moment. We don't want you plebs to have any share of this wealth. We've been working for 30, 40 years to take the money up to us, and we're keeping it. So it's a really dangerous time. And yet we've got one of the stupidest and wickedest and most dangerous prime ministers in London with the weakest first minister in Scotland. And that's a recipe for disaster. I don't think anybody in the SNP is going to ask Nicola Sturgeon just to step aside. They can give her a dignified exit. They can do that. But as I said at the beginning, I was taught not to deal in personalities, but when you look at our predicament, that path leads only to one desk. And there's a sign on the desk. It says, "The buck stops with me." She has to understand that. Nothing personal, Nicola, but in any other job, you'd have been shifted to another department months ago.
Yeah. Well, that ties in with one of the questions. What advice do you give people who still have faith in Mrs. Sturgeon?
If they have that, then they have a moral obligation to put her right. They have to explain things to her. It's not a matter of saying, I will not hear any criticisms of her. They should do the diplomatic thing and go around, go and speak to her privately. Say, look, you got this all wrong. I'm really sorry. There are people out there that you've disenfranchised, you've disaffected them. 2 years ago, there weren't another 2 independent parties. You've done that now. So at the worst possible time, you've split a wonderfully cohesive movement for nationhood. These things lie at your door, Nicola. We would like you to step aside. I find it very depressing. I find my job, my self-appointed job, is trying my best to keep people's hopes and spirits up. I didn't think I would have to do that. I didn't think I would have to answer people who said, I've had enough of this. We're never going to get independence. And I have to say, no, we will. You can't stop a movement. As I finish off talks by saying, no country has ever risen up to demand its eradication. Scotland will be independent. But the terrifying thing is, it should have happened a few years ago because we're in a terrible mess now, confronted by the Tory party and the DUP and Gordon Brown. Gordon Brown's one of the worst, working with these people to try and concoct some kind of phony federalist system that will be a distraction. It'll never amount to anything, but it'll get everybody talking and arguing amongst each other, just the same as the GRA bill has done, and the hate crime bill, and the kind of stupid things that the SNP have done. There are some honourable people in the SNP, but they're not doing much. Being honourable isn't enough when your country's future is at stake. So, one of the things I would have in a new Scotland would be a truth commission. And some of these people have been causing us a lot of bother. They'll be called to account. They won't be put in prison. They won't be fined. And those who say, I won't be there, I'm not going to talk. I'm not going to explain why I said Scotland shouldn't use the pound. Well, we know where they stand. They will not be they will not be accepted in Scotland. We have to do that. It's a kind of thing, you know, that happened in South Africa. It worked there. So, and other African states. And we're in a colonized country where people are briefing against us in cohorts with Westminster and Whitehall. So yeah, they have to explain why they did that.
Okay. Okay. On that note, we will say goodnight to our viewers, but thanks very much, Gareth, for being with us, and stick around for a couple minutes after the credits roll. Okay. And thank you everybody for watching.
I don't know if I've helped any, but
it's good to give your wisdom. I'm sure it's beneficial.
Thank you for calling it wisdom. I usually get dragged onto these programs to give a bit of class, you know. So I'll fold up my bookcase here. It's totally fake. I'll fold it up.
Yeah, I always want to get a poster with a bookcase on it. Just
oh, Scotland, my Scotland. Okay.
All right.
All right, friends.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Mark.